Good morning and welcome back. It's a cold morning here on the Darling Downs. We're down to 1 degree, so no frost, not as cold as yesterday. Today I want to talk about another just sad, anger-inducing topic that really highlights how this country is broken. I've talked about recently the Alice Springs riots and some issues surrounding that, which of course are ongoing. It's indicative of a much larger issue. Today I wanted to talk about something else that caught my attention in the news and that's been plastered everywhere recently, and that is the return of the ISIS brides. Now, for those of you who haven't been keeping up what's going on, basically these are women who went overseas to support their husbands who were members of ISIS. Basically, the ISIS brides that are returning to Australia, they were Australian citizens, as were their husbands, and they're basically, they went overseas to Syria, Iraq, wherever, ISIS caliphate, to support their husbands that were terrorists fighting for ISIS, pretty much. Which, by definition, doesn't that also make them terrorists? And essentially what's happening is, ISIS has lost their caliphate, they got smashed, and a lot of these women, they were stuck in camps and all this stuff, and basically now they are being allowed to come back to the country. Now, the government is claiming that they are not aiding them to come back, that they are on their own, and basically that they're just coming back of their own accord. It's not like the government is sending them a charter flight or stuff to come back. Apparently they are arranging their own transport, and they're just being allowed to essentially come back because they're citizens, they're such valuable members of society, right? So they're being allowed to come back. There have been a few arrests, like there were some of them, police were waiting at the airport, and there have been some arrests made. But the big issue with this that I can see, it's not even necessarily the ISIS brides themselves. I mean, that's a big issue, but the issue is they're also coming with their children. And just think, man, at a young age like that, that is when the radicalization occurs. Like some of the things they would have seen and witnessed. Unfortunately, I think it's safe to say that some of these kids or many of these kids will already have been radicalized. And what's going to happen when they grow older, when they grow up? What's going to happen? We've already seen an significant increase in terror threats across Australia. We saw the tragedy at Bondi last year. I just have to be really careful talking about this stuff now because they have passed new speech laws. As I mentioned previously, Australia is in a free speech emergency. So look, I'm not one of these people that is blindly supporting crackdowns against terror threats, because unfortunately in many cases basically they can use terror threats, which are real, but they can use these threats as an excuse to pass more draconian laws. In fact, at the moment there's an ongoing debate where there's so much to cover here. I can't cover all of this in one video, but basically in the wake of, say, an event like 9/11, they passed a bunch of temporary acts which are meant to be temporary, which granted the federal police and certain agencies a lot more powers. It's similar to say Patriot Act in US, which gives certain agencies a lot more power. But in Australia, of course, they went significantly further even than the US. That Patriot Act, for example, is well known. They've gone a lot further here, and some of these laws, essentially it's been a temporary act, right? So they've had to continually review it every few years and vote on whether to extend it. Well, now they want to make it permanent so that there's no more debate. It's just a permanent part of the legal framework, which would mean that, warrants are basically useless. Citizens can just be detained without a warrant. That's already a thing. It's already a thing. But it would essentially make any existing protections essentially useless, because it's so arbitrary. They could just target anyone and then that's it, you're gone, you can disappear. So yeah, it's dangerous to even talk about some of this stuff. But yeah, who's going to take notice of such a insignificant small channel like mine? Am I right? But still, I've got to be careful the way I word certain things. So look, I'm no stranger to the fact that terrorism, unfortunately, which is real, is used as an excuse to then crack down on legitimate dissent, your actual legitimate dissent. That's the way things go, unfortunately. It's like never let a good tragedy go to waste. You don't have to believe in alleged conspiracy theories, many of which are basically turned out to be true. I'm not going to name any, but certain conspiracy theories have been found to be true now. It's pretty well known. But yeah, like you don't even have to go there. Like you don't have to believe in that to see that they use these events as an excuse to crack down. However, it doesn't dismiss the threat that the fact that there is terror threats out there, and say the ISIS brides and especially their kids. I think that is the real problem. That is where the radicalization and future threats will develop. It unfortunately always starts with children. And look, I feel sorry. I definitely would feel sorry for these kids, in the current state. But you're not going to feel sorry for them when they grow up, and then that mindset continues on, passed from one generation to the next. So what's the solution here? What should have happened? Well, this is the simple argument I would make. They should never let these sort of people back to the country. If, say, an Australian citizen goes overseas to fight for a terrorist organization, any terror organization, not just ISIS, any terror organization, they should immediately be stripped of their citizenship and barred from ever returning. That's what should happen. Any Australian citizen that goes overseas to fight or support a foreign terror organization, they should have their citizenship revoked and be barred from returning. And yeah, look, these women that returned, the brides, they basically their husbands, they were fighting for ISIS, and most of them are now dead. And yeah, now suddenly they want to return to Australia. I wonder why. They should be stripped of citizenship and barred from ever returning. That's a simple solution. That's what should happen. They should never have been allowed to come back, but alas, they are being allowed to return. So yeah, it's just another thing that, like, the Australian government is so weak. It's so weak on this issue. So yeah, it's just, and then there's some scenes in Melbourne, right, where there's some journalists that are there, of course, trying to get a story, trying to ask some important questions, and then there's like literal ISIS supporters marching in the street. Yeah, ISIS supporters marching in the street of Melbourne, and cities is probably Sydney as well, and police are doing nothing. Police do nothing to, it's ridiculous. They pass, this is what infuriates me. They pass all these speech laws. They pass all these, they basically pass all these draconian measures, which cracks down on genuine dissent, just your average person speaking up. But actual terrorists, actual threats, they ignore, they let fester. And this is the way that Australian society operates, isn't it? It is. You have these lone actors, these isolated incidents of extremism, which is real, and then they basically just punish the whole population for it. It's like at school, you have one student that does something wrong, and then the whole class gets punished for it. Which I've always thought is utter BS, and that's essentially how they're treating us. It goes back a long way, really, doesn't it? Like, they hate us. They really do. They do. That's what most people don't realize. They hate us. They just, I don't even want to go there, but that's the situation. So yeah, we have a weak and incompetent government. Well, I start to not even think that they are incompetent. I start to think that they're just doing this whole thing on purpose. They are. They probably are doing it on purpose. But that's where I'll leave it here. I could go way deeper, but no, we don't have free speech in this country, so I've got to be careful where I go. So that's it. I'll see you all in the next one. Onwards and upwards.